Hi there. This is Friday, May 7th. Guess what? This is May 7th is the anniversary of the official ending of the Vietnam War. And so I want to take a minute to say thank you to everybody who fought in the Vietnam War and has survived. I want to say how sorry I am for the way the Vietnam vets have been treated. I think an awful lot of the people who are homeless on the street were from that war. Uh, there were people who I think Jane Fonda did a real disservice to our country with the bashing she did. War is a terrible thing. And so much of the wars that have been fought have been about enriching the pockets of the elite who fund the war, fund both sides. It's been about enriching the pockets of the elite who strip the country's resources with no regard for the damage that is done to the people. My folks took in a refugee couple from Cambodia who had a baby. The husband had trekked 2 weeks through the jungle, carrying his wife on his back when she was near the end of her pregnancy. And their baby was born in the Thailand refugee camp, and then they came to the States. There were several that came to Northern Illinois where they lived, and it was hard. It was hard their lifestyle was so incredibly different. She had to teach them how to do everything. They didn't know what a toilet was. They didn't know how to wash their hands. They didn't know how to use hot water to wash dishes. They were used to cold water, but learning how to turn on a faucet was a big deal, inside anyhow. I mean, I know growing up in Jamaica, we had an outside faucet. In the beginning, water was 2 miles away. And they finally, because we were living there, brought a pipe up so that we had water at the end, just outside the church compound where we were. Our house was on the property with the church. I think of people who fought in that war, and this is true of other veterans as well. The PTSD that they have lived with all these years because of what they saw and what they did. Larry finally asked me, maybe 2019, 2020, no, 2019. He said, "Do you think I have PTSD?" I said, "Larry, it would be more unusual for you to think you didn't." I know the guilt he lived with. It was hard to go to sleep because of what he would see, what he would remember. And so I think of him as, I didn't have people that I knew who had fought. And so he was a real eye-opener to me about what the experience of war is. And to think that this is today the anniversary, I just want to remember the people that we care about. If you know somebody, I've got another friend who is suffering terribly and holds things in and isn't able to express himself the way his wife and kids would like him to do. I think that's part of his PTSD because of things that happened. I have several friends, multiple, more than one, who was very badly abused by homosexual commanders. And what a shock and a shame that was back then. And the difficulty they have had. When somebody is not behaving in a way that we think is normal, it's amazing what we don't understand that they're holding in and are ashamed to tell or afraid that we can't handle hearing about it. Trying to figure out how to get past all of that is really hard. It's really hard. And say a prayer today, being the anniversary of Vietnam's ending of the war, the official ending of the war today. Please say a prayer today. Whether you know a Vietnam vet or not, say a prayer for those guys. They need extra help from the Lord. They need comfort. They need strength. They need courage. They need help. They're aging. They're in their 70s. And they need to be taken care of. So let's just set aside some time at the rest of this day to think about what they've been through that we have no idea about, and ask the Lord to please consider what they did as a seed for a harvest that it's time that they reap. You know, speaking of reaping a harvest, I think of all the people that turned on Larry over the years and didn't give him the support that he really needed for all the things he did. And I'm just thrilled, and I think that's the right word to say. I'm so pleased that the people that were here, even though we were very, very few, and there were a few trolls that would come in occasionally, but the few people that were here to hear him, he wanted to be with us. I don't know if you were here the day that he was struggling so hard to breathe, and I suggested he get off, and he jabbed back at me. Oh, you want to get rid of me, huh? Which wasn't my feeling at all. But after he kept going, I realized, wait a minute, you know, there's a reason he didn't want to go and take care of himself. There was something about our being with him that was really important to him. And we gave him strength and courage that he didn't have otherwise. And so if you listen to this later and you see this, just know I'm saying thank you to you again. For even if you weren't a donor, the fact that you would be here to listen, and would, especially if you interacted in the chat, not by distracting to a different subject, but we're actually responding to what he said, that meant a lot to him. And I'm really proud of our being able to walk with him through the end of his life, because he was able to end feeling encouraged. And I thank you for that. I'm thinking about the people who are talking about Trump coming back. And I think we all need to be cautious about our hope being in a person, someone in power. You know, if you're a Democrat and you're hoping for Biden and Harris and Pelosi and Schumer and so on to do what you want, you know, the same holds true for them as well. We have to be very cautious about having our hope hinged upon a person in power. Our hope has to be in the Lord, and that he is going to guide us through whatever it is that we are going to experience in the next few years before the Lord returns. And we need to remember that God is watching. Remember when Satan came before God, and Satan roams to and fro throughout the earth, but it's also the Lord who has some, you know, part of his team that roam to and fro throughout the earth to report to God. God is watching, and there is a record being made of everything that we say and everything we do. And learning to catch my tongue against saying something negative. I was ready to spit something out to somebody new yesterday, and I went, you know what? I am not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. You know, we think that we are relating to what somebody else is saying. Well, that happened to me, and here's my story. We got to be real careful about that sounding like we're doing a one-up on the other person. You know, my situation's worse, and I survived, but no, we can't do that. So I'm learning that there's a lot of stuff that I have to let go and just let it be in the past. And I think I will do better in trying to build relationships by just concentrating on letting the other person speak, not even to prove what I can understand, you know? Um, did you hear that the World Health Organization today approved a new needle induced medication? Let's put it that way. So the Chinese now have their jab available that's gotten approval from the World Health Organization. It's now the 6th medication that they have that has been approved to be used. I don't know if you saw the little thing that Dr. Kelly Ward gave on the Arizona audit, but they tried to go into court and stop the audit, and they didn't have enough proof. And even their handpicked Democrat judge threw out their case because they didn't have enough proof. So now they're trying to get the DOJ to get involved, claiming that there's a lack of security at the building, but they've got cameras galore. They're saying that things are being done to the ballots and so on, but again, there's lack of evidence. And so their lack of evidence has meant that it's been rejected by the state courts, and so now they're trying to get federal courts involved. They're just doing everything they can to jam this thing up. They even had Democrat people come in claiming they wanted to help or they wanted to observe, and they were just there as spies. And now we hear that Christian, I hope that will be successful for you. That sounds like a good idea. Now there's talk about there are multiple passwords, 2 passwords to get into the Dominion machines. And here the state claims that they don't even have the second password. They just let Dominion run things with their second password, didn't get the password from Dominion. And who knows what other country even had the way in. So what's going on there is interference and interference and interference. And I hope that you are praying for what's going on in Arizona, that God would intercede and let truth come out, and that the people who are trying to block the truth would be stopped. I got a phone call about an hour ago. What did I do with the paper? They said to go to Real Raw News. Now, I tried Googling that and I didn't quite get it, but it was supposedly discussing a trial of John Podesta, discussing of multiple attempts on Trump's life, and family members, and I'm just not going to repeat here the things that I was told because I don't have the proof of it. We do know that there have been attempts on President Trump's life. We know that for sure. There's no hiding that. I knew that one of his Secret Service agents had been killed, had died in Scotland because he was checking the toiletries, Trump's toiletries, and sniffed something that had poison in it, which killed him. And apparently there have been other similar types of attempts where the people around Trump have died in their work that they were paid to do to protect him. So, I have my alarm set for 6:00 every single night to pray for him. That's an interesting concept, Charlotte. Wow. Boy, is there a way, Charlotte, if you go to Mary Ellen, the numeral 4, and then Larry, Mary Ellen for Larry at Yahoo. And if there's a way, and Christian, you need to do that too. Maybe we can get you guys together to discuss how that's helping Charlotte. It might be able to help Christian. Okay, I said I would go over the Bible survey of the books of prophecy. This pastor that had this on the web, I went back to look for it, and it's been taken off the web, which I thought was a bit of a surprise. And some of what he's written now, I think he may have, it makes me wonder if he was just kind of doing some of this on his own study, and it was incomplete. I think what he did at the beginning was a little fuller than this. You know, it is supposed to be illegal to demand that you get something like that, James, for school and work. It's supposed to not be legal, but unless Trump comes back to stop that, I don't know. And absolutely, Christian, Satan's trying to create chaos for sure. Thank you, Charlotte, for that. Sounds and vibrations, Christian, look it up. So the book of Isaiah is the next one. There are 5 major prophets and I think 12 minor prophets. So Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, also written by Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel are considered the 5 major prophets. Isaiah had 4 different well, there are 4 different titles for a prophet. They're called a prophet. Sometimes they're called a seer because they see things, they have visions. They're obviously a true prophet's going to be a man of God and considered a servant of God. Isaiah has, the first prophet would have been Moses with the things that he knew. And they are spokesmen for God. So the book of Isaiah has 66 chapters, and some people think that each chapter tends to line up with what is going on in, the 66 books of the Bible. The name Isaiah means the Lord saves. He ministered mostly to the northern kingdom when it was taken captive by Assyria. So he was trying to get the people to repent so they wouldn't be taken off and taken captive. Of course, the people didn't listen any more than, and then, after having that example, Judah still as well, didn't listen and ended up going into captivity later. I think the northern kingdom, I think it was 756 BC when they were taken, and it was, I think, 586 or 7 when the southern kingdom went. Now the northern kingdom went to Assyria, and the southern kingdom went to Babylon. But both of those areas were part of Iraq. Chapters 1 through 39 deal with the judgment of Israel, and 40 to 66 deal with the redemption of Israel. Now in chapter 6, we see Isaiah's call, and we're going to be dealing with that next week when we have a prayer by Isaiah. It's when he said, "Here am I, send me," when he got called. Chapter 14 deals with the devil, and that's where the name Lucifer appears, and it's the only place in the Bible that refers to him by that name. And of course, Isaiah 53, where it talks about the crucifixion. And it's amazing how many Jews don't like to read that chapter and they skip over that because they don't want to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. And yet there are people who read Isaiah 53 and recognize how it fits with Jesus. Christian, I don't remember if I've got your contact information. I've got another suggestion for you to look into as well. Jeremiah contains 52 chapters. He was a prophet to the south. He was a well, I don't know if he was a contemporary of Daniel. Daniel was reading the prophecy of Jeremiah and realized Jeremiah had said that they would be in captivity for 70 years. And then Daniel prayed, is it chapter 9, I think, where Daniel prays and asks for God's forgiveness on behalf of the nation of Israel, of Judah. And, says, hey, you promised we'd come back to Jerusalem after 70 years. It's time. So Jeremiah was a prophet to the southern kingdom. He was known as the weeping prophet because of Lamentations, which was probably written shortly after the destruction of Jeremiah. And the interesting thing about the book of Lamentations is it has a lot of acrostics in it. So it's an arrangement where the verse starts with there were 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and each verse starts with that. Some chapters have just one set of verses, the Hebrew alphabet, and others have multiple. God, he says here, God's phone number is Jeremiah 33:3. Yeah, Christian, it's at Yahoo. It may be there, and I just haven't been paying attention. Jeremiah 33:3 says, call unto me, and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things that you don't know. Or another way of saying is beyond what you would expect or know. So after Jeremiah came Ezekiel, and he was a prophet to the exiles and may have known Daniel. The word Ezekiel means God strengthens. El, of course, is God, that at the end of the word. There are 48 chapters in Ezekiel. Ezekiel was both a priest and a prophet. Chapter 28 describes the devil. Chapters 37 to 39 describe war in the end times, especially 38 and 39. There's one place where it talks about the dry bones that live again. And that is, many think, a reference to Israel coming back to being a nation again. Ezekiel was told to present signs to the people. So remember, Ezekiel was told to draw out a map on the ground and walk around it as he was praying for the nation. God made him dumb. He wasn't allowed to speak for a certain amount of time. He gave it a sign of unclean bread. There was a sign of an unclean pan. He was told to lie on his side, shave his hair. Anyhow, there were 12 different signs that he gave. Some of Ezekiel's a little hard to understand. For example, it talks about a wheel within the wheel. People wonder if that's a gyroscope. Some angels are described that have, they face multiple directions, and all directions go together. So he's describing a physical resurrection of Israel, and he describes the millennial temple at the very end of time. Daniel has only 12 chapters, and he was a prophet during the exile. It's interesting, his friends, I knew them without looking them up a little bit ago. Anyhow, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were their Babylonian names. And their friendship, they are probably the ones that with Daniel refused the king's food. And when it was time to bow down, we don't hear anything about Daniel at that time, and they think that Daniel was maybe off on some kind of official duty somewhere else in the kingdom. because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were the ones that were put in the fiery furnace because they refused to bow down to the golden statue of the king Nebuchadnezzar. The interesting thing is on Facebook, there were pictures, Star Wars talks about may the force be with you. So on the 4th, there were people saying, may the 4th be with you, which is kind of a spinoff on that. But I saw a picture of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Jesus in the fire saying, may the 4th be with you. And it's a way of saying, may the Lord be with you through whatever you're doing. The word Daniel, the name Daniel means God is my judge. Jesus himself mentioned that Daniel was a prophet. He prophesied in the king's court, not just to the people. He himself was of royal descent, and God highly esteemed him. And he rose to the highest position in the kingdoms of Babylon, Media, and Persia, because he wouldn't compromise anything, even when they tried to take him out because he was praying, and therefore thrown in the lion's den in chapter 4. He would not compromise. So then there are 12 minor prophets. The first 9 were written before the exile, and the last 3 were after the exile. So you've got Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah were written before the exile, and then Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi were after the exile. Hosea prophesied to the north, and he was the last prophet to speak to the north. Hosea has always amazed me because of, Isaiah and Ezekiel were also told to do some pretty strange things. One was supposed to, walk naked, and as a symbol that that the sins had been exposed or were going to be exposed. One had to lay on his side for months. Hosea was told to marry a prostitute. And Gomer didn't want to stay with him and went back to her prostitution and was beat up very badly by one of her paid customers. And he took her back. He was told to take her back, and he obeyed God. God told him to take her back and to speak to the people that his marriage was a symbol of what was going on between God and Israel. That the Israelites were like a prostitute with their idolatry, and God wanted them to come back no matter what they were doing. And of course, they refused. Hosea called the northern kingdom by 3 different names. He called them Israel, Samaria, which was the capital city, and Ephraim. Ephraim was I think the largest tribe. Ephraim had been a son of Joseph, and Joseph's 2 children, Ephraim and Manasseh, each had a tribal land and were considered tribes in Joseph's place, and they're still considered 12 tribes because the sons of Levi were not given territory of their own. They were spread out. They were the priests. The priesthood, it was spread out around the kingdoms, around the tribes, and given cities and farmland, but not a tribe of their own. It's interesting. Of the last 6 kings in the northern kingdom, only 1 died of natural causes. The rest of them were murdered and replaced. The book of Joel talks about the day of the Lord, which is the end time prophecy. In Acts 2, Peter quotes part of Joel 2. Joel 3 gives the location of the Battle of Armageddon. Joel 3, I think, or is it Haggai? Joel talks about the day of the Lord. I think it's Haggai that talks about the dead fish, dead birds, dead animals. Amos, the next prophet, he was a herdsman or a shepherd and a cultivator. So he was a farmer and a shepherd. He predicted a big earthquake, which happened. He also had a message, can two walk together unless they are agreed? And he also told the people to prepare to meet your God. He had 5 visions: vision of grasshoppers, a vision or locusts, a vision of fire, a vision of a plumb line where God is saying, I've held up a plumb line and you're not straight the way you're supposed to be. A vision of summer fruit, and another vision of the Lord. Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament. It's only 1 chapter long. He pronounced judgment on Edom. The word means red, and Esau was considered ruddy or red, and we suppose that's because he may have had reddish skin but red hair, and he was very hairy, so his red hair would make him look like he was red everywhere. The Edomites would not let Israel pass through the land when they were leaving Egypt and coming into Canaan, and God was not happy with them for that. Now, the book of Jonah, I think, is 4 chapters long. Jonah preached to Nineveh and said, in 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed if you don't repent. And the people were amazingly quick to repent. Jonah wanted them to be punished because Nineveh had been so hard on the people, his people, that he wanted vengeance. He wanted God to take out vengeance on Nineveh, in retaliation to what suffering that his people, Jonah's people, had done. And so he didn't want to go. And yet the purpose of Jonah shows God's desire that the Gentiles be given salvation as well. Even in the Old Testament there, God is saying, hey, I care about everybody, not just the people of Israel and Judah. Jonah wanted to flee, so he boarded in Joppa. He boarded a ship going to Tarshish. Now remember, Joppa is the city where Peter had the vision of the sheet let down with all kinds of unclean animals. And God said, rise, kill, and eat. And that was, Peter recognized that as God's will for him to go and speak to the Roman guard who had called for him. God graciously called Jonah twice. And after the fish had spat him up on land was the second time God called him, and he obeyed at that point. He's the only preacher that didn't want somebody to repent from what he said. Micah preached at the same time as Isaiah to the common people. Isaiah preached at the king's court, and Micah preached to the common people. Nahum also declared judgment on Nineveh, and the key words in the book of Nahum are revenge and vengeance. Now, Habakkuk was the last prophet to speak to the south before they were taken into captivity. He was probably a part of the temple choir, and he said in Habakkuk 2 verse 4 that the just shall live by faith, something that is reiterated again in book of Hebrews. Zephaniah was a contemporary of Jeremiah, and he also spoke about the day of the Lord, just like Joel did. Haggai was the first post-exile prophet after the people came back. He knew both the prophet Zechariah and Zerubbabel, who rebuilt the temple. His message in Haggai was God first, and he was calling the people to rebuild the temple. He said, look, you've rebuilt your own homes, and God doesn't have a place to dwell. You need to build the temple back. Zechariah has several prophecies about the Lord. I think there's 12 chapters in Zechariah, and there's a lot of the prophetic there that pertains to us. And Malachi was the last prophet of the Old Testament. He had in Malachi 3, he has a prophecy of John the Baptist, or the baptizer, and he's got a whole section on the importance of sharing what you have and giving to the Lord first, and that you're stealing from God if you don't share your income with him. So that's it for to finish up the survey of the Old Testament. Not sure when we'll get to the New Testament. That'll be a while. So next week we will talk about Isaiah's prayer when God called him in Isaiah 6. And then there's also a prayer of Jeremiah, and I think the books, wait a second. So there's prayer of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Jonah, Habakkuk. Those are the last 4 that we have in this book, prayers of the Old Testament. Now, I can read that the right way. I don't know about you guys. Is it backwards to you? It looks forwards to me, but I don't know. Of course, I can read backwards just as easily, so it doesn't really matter. Anyhow, be blessed this weekend. Happy Mother's Day to any of you who are mothers. Any of you who are husbands, don't forget your wife for Mother's Day, and make sure your kids do something really special for their mom. Something. Find out what she wants. I know when I had so many kids, there were times they wanted to do something for me, but there were times when I wished he would have taken them and done something with them at the park or something, so I could have taken a nap. So, be mindful of what your wife needs if you are married, and if you are a widow and your children are away from you, I say have a blessed Mother's Day, and remember how much God cares for you. Have a blessed weekend, and we will talk on Monday again. Bye-bye.